Good morning, everybody. It is so great to see you. I love the music at the beginning, and even more, I just love seeing all your smiling faces and smiling photos on your Zoom icons. It's just wonderful that we are all able to be here today at the very end of the semester. As Jules said, I'm Heather McCullough, Associate Director for Faculty Development in the Center for Teaching and Learning. And it is truly my pleasure to welcome you to the Active Learning Academy Spring Expo, a day for sharing and learning. And I really want to welcome each and every one of you here at the very end of the semester. We're really delighted to see everybody here at this expo that we have had to postpone a couple of times due to the pandemic. So we're excited as well that we're able to hold the event. Active learning, as you all know, undoubtedly, is one of the high impact practices that research shows contributes positively to student engagement and success. It can strengthen inclusion and belonging in the classroom and promote a sense of community among our students. Our Active Learning Academy, affectionately known as the ALA, is a community of dedicated faculty. You all who are here this morning, who seek to learn from each other and to strengthen your teaching practice. You meet, for those who are not a part of the ALA and who are attending our Active Learning Academy, members meet regularly in small teams throughout the year to study, to discuss, and to share teaching strategies. Our ALA was founded in 2014, and it's been running annually since then. Hundreds of faculty members have participated in the Active Learning Academy, and the numbers of students that you, our Active Learning faculty members have reached is just truly remarkable. Last year alone, Active Learning Academy members and alumni delivered over 1,600 courses. That was just last year, 1,600 courses, 13% of all Charlotte courses. And you submitted almost 43,000 student grades, or 15% of all Charlotte student grades last year. So let that sink in. The work that you're doing here to learn, to share, to strengthen, to build your practice, and to expand the use of Active Learning Academy, of active learning strategies is having a really profound impact on our culture of teaching and learning at UNC Charlotte, and is reaching so many students. Our Active Learning, your Active Learning Academy, is lauded as a model in teaching and learning circles, regionally, nationally, and that is because of each of you here. Your work has produced books, articles, teaching resources, and very importantly, fellowship and an engaging community of practice that's all dedicated to supporting our students' success. So as we kick off this wonderful day, I want to share a round of thank yous to our faculty, to our Active Learning faculty, who demonstrate tremendous creativity and commitment to your students and to developing your teaching practice. This really it's remarkable, and I think we need to call that out and raise that up and celebrate what you're doing here in this community. It's through your engagement this year. You have shared and learned from each other, and you have contributed to a culture of teaching and learning that truly makes Charlotte special. I also want to thank our CTL team for all of their work supporting our faculty and programming with enthusiasm and with energy throughout the year. And then finally, just a big thanks to Jules Keith Lee, who has become our university champion for active learning. She puts her heart and soul into this wonderful community, and I think we see the fantastic results and the wide-ranging results of all of that effort. If you're not a part of the Active Learning Academy, please view our website. I'm sure somebody can put it in the chat to learn about how to get involved in next year's cohort, which is going to focus on supporting diverse learners. So we have a wonderful day of programming that includes lightning talks this morning and this afternoon, and also a keynote, as Jules mentioned, at 11 a.m. by Dr. Angela Gunder, Chief Academic Officer at the Online Learning Consortium. Thank you all for being here on Reading Day at the end of the semester to continue to build and share and think about how we strengthen our teaching practice, and engage our students with active learning. So with that, welcome. I'm so excited to join everybody this morning as we kick off our day dedicated to active teaching and learning and student success. I will turn it back over to Jules.
Thank you so much, Heather, for that wonderful welcome. I'm going to go ahead and ask our first team, led by Susanna and Brittany, to share their presentation and begin their lightning talk.
Great, thanks, Jules. I think Susanna is going to share the slides.
There we go. Can you all see the slides?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so our project was titled "What We Carry Carries Over into the Classroom." And what we really wanted to do with this was create a space for faculty to come and share about themselves and listen and hear about others as well. So oftentimes in the Active Learning Academy, we frequently discuss how we can support students and like what we can do to support them. And I think that was very apparent, over the pandemic. And we wanted to provide faculty with this kind of unique space to have this informal, unscripted, unrecorded discussion of how things that they carry, both, positive things and, additional stressors, and how that impacts their ability to engage in active learning. One thing that we really, throughout our discussions as a group that came apparent is that, in order to engage your students in active learning, you yourself have to be present. And it's that concept that if you're on an airplane, and they always tell you, before you help anyone else, you need to put your own oxygen mask on. And, I do think that, throughout the past several years, faculty have carried a lot of additional stressors, and this provided a nice environment where we used active learning techniques. People shared their own narratives, we shared ours. We also used tools like Poll Everywhere to provide individuals with multiple ways to share. You didn't necessarily have to share openly about your narrative. And I think that we had some really productive conversations, and hopefully people came out of this, feeling very supported. From here, we were just going to share sort of all the dimensions of ourselves through pictures and, both positive and negative stressors that kind of make you as a person. And, we are as faculty people, and we're all engaging and, supporting our students in this active learning environment.
So we are three. We're Susanna Cisneros, Julie Cook, and Brittany Johnson. We're going to honor Julie Cook. At this time, she is taking care of her family circumstances. So we're going to just share part of herself in the slideshow as well. So here we go.
This is my lab and one of my collaborators, and part of me is working to support them.
And here is an amazing story about how we came collaborative with all the students, the Hispanic students in the university, and we worked in a festival, the international festival. This is Julie Cook. She recently was one of the moderator as well as one of the teachers for the winners, Ro and Lauren, and it was an amazing experience as a reader for them.
We all are very busy, and this just kind of captures some of what we carry as faculty. We all have so many different responsibilities, and we felt like this really, captures our job responsibilities in a lot of ways.
This is another amazing opportunity when we carry things into the classroom and out of the classroom, when students get to actually see themselves somewhere else and get into that extra mile. That is kind of like the moment that you carry that energy when you do something personal into the classroom.
This is another example of that, engaging outside of the classroom. this is some of the students that I work with and mentor, and us going to a conference in our area of study and the opportunity that provided for them. This is an example of Julie, and again, it shows multiple facets of her, her in more of a professional capacity, but also in a personal capacity as well. We also just wanted, in this discussion, it came out a lot about, us balancing our mental health as well, and just health in general. And I think that, we all sometimes feel like we're juggling, and it's important for us to, acknowledge our own status. And again, before we engage in supporting everyone else in this active learning environment.
So we bring that into the classroom with a mental health day in Spanish, and students were able to actually explore the same activities that we do in our daily life, but in the classroom with a different outlet for their stress.
And again, we're all here to teach and learn. And so this is just a big component of all of us as faculty.
So let's take teaching out of the classroom and go to an art studio, interview the artist, and again, collaboratively play with the pictures, with the painting.
And this is a big positive, and also like a positive thing, and also a little bit of a stressor depending on your field, but funding. You want to support your students through funding and research and engaging both graduate and undergraduates. And a big part of that is funding here. And this is just some of my students, in particular, my undergraduate students engaged in, actively doing experiments, and some pictures of the cells and bacteria that we work with.
And here are the students. Again, funding is a big thing, and students need to be able to go to conferences and present. So the students we worked together, and we all presented in CX in 2022.
This is my husband and family, and just something else that is a part of me, and way to like relate. And this is me in my new lab, which has been an exciting thing, but sometimes also can be both positive and negative. Setting up a new lab's a big task, and so that's been a lot of what I've been doing this year in order to have a space where students can engage and kind of bridge that gap in teaching and research.
It's time for celebration. So part of being in the classroom is also being when they are in the finish line. So this is an example of the students that I love supporting, and we continue the relationship after this.
This is, everyone in the biology department, and, it takes a great team. And, one of the things that we really wanted to do with our workshop was, support each other and support other faculty on campus. And, I think that one of the strengths of UNCC is really that team mentality and supporting each other. And that came out as well in our workshop.
And this is us. And we spend a lot of time listening to each other and seeing each other's struggles and stressors and celebrations. They all intersect in this teaching and learning. And I am so honored to be able to work with Brittany and Julie. And I just met these ladies, but they are just my tribe.
And so that's the end of our lightning talk. And, we're excited that we've created kind of this nice network to continue to collaborate with each other and support each other as well.
Thank you so much for that. And I will go ahead and welcome our next group to share their presentation. I believe Courtney is going to share on behalf of Courtney and Lane.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am joining you all from Tennessee this morning. So awesome that our presentation is about HyFlex and that this is a virtual session. I'm going to get us started. My name is Courtney Smith from Electrical and Computer Engineering. Sandra couldn't be with us this morning. And then Lane, can you chip in, introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lane Rhodes, and I work in the English department and sometimes teach for interdisciplinary studies and American studies as well. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate my team as well, getting to meet these women.
So we want to talk to you about HyFlex. So if you were able to join us, and I know there were about a handful of people who made it to our session, which was being able to smell, taste, hear, and feel things in the classroom. So a bit of a multi-sensory approach to active learning. And two, we had the opportunity to be the first group to present in the CTL's HyFlex classroom space. So we want to tell you a little bit about that experience and why it exists to some extent and how beneficial we found it to be. So why would you ever choose HyFlex? So I think most of us have become familiar with something similar to the concept, and we've talked a little bit about this being a bit interchangeable of a term with our classrooms during COVID. So being able to interact live, both in person and virtually with our classroom or participants. So in this environment, we're able to see, hear, and engage with all parties at once. The attendance of all people in the group, regardless of how they participate, can certainly be equally beneficial. And we think that this space particularly provides an excellent opportunity to have a great educational experience. But certainly, you might find that you prefer this type of learning style, or you may prefer to just have students in person, which we understand, but we know because the world continues to change and things that can be unexpected, this is a great option. And so we wanted to share kind of our experience in utilizing the space and how you might also consider using the space in the future.
There are other terms that other universities and users substitute for HyFlex. It is a lot more engaged than just the simulcast. It goes deeper and requires more coordination, the juggling between the electronic equipment and the person's in person, the learners in person. Mode neutral, multi-access learning, flex learning, converged learning, Pierce fit, multi-options, blend fix, all of these terms you may hear as you read in different articles, and they all mean this HyFlex. It's really more of a strategy than, it's an institutional strategy, the HyFlex. So it can include many different terms. And it is that idea of engaging learners in an equal platform, either virtually or in person, that it's not a lesser experience to be outside the physical classroom than it is. So each group has an equal experience is the goal. And Jules shared with us a lot of articles that are helpful in understanding the complexities of HyFlex and the importance, the benefits, and maybe even anticipated negatives that people can overcome if you learn more comprehensively what it's about. So I've added a link there. I can put that in the chat as well. It's helpful to universities to stay relevant is the main feeling about this.
So what are some of the benefits of using a HyFlex teaching approach, as Lane just described? So one of the great options is that you can share content not only with students who you have both in person and virtual from your own university, but there's opportunity to potentially cross-collaborate and teach students at different institutions. Today, I think, is a good example that I'm at UT Knoxville today and am presenting from here, from a beautiful hotel room. But the opportunity to be able to do that. And so we could have people in the classroom who are engaging and could still hear and see me in the classroom and be able to engage in that way. It certainly eliminates some of the geographical and physical barriers and boundaries that we have to be able to add more opportunities to engage with different countries, different parts of the world, different cultures, and provide access. The other benefit potentially is some accessibility with having people online who may need the use of closed captions or some type of remote access to information or technology can be beneficial as well. I like the last group talked about funding, right? And we certainly know that budgets are important, and the ability to invite in speakers who can still not only just talk across the screen, but engage with learners or participants in a way that can still be interactive at a lesser cost. Now, before you jump fully into this high flex classroom space, there are definitely some things that you have to consider in order to get ready for this experience. So some of the things we had to think about before beginning our presentation or our workshop was thinking about video, audio, the room, you know, what kind of access people needed to different types of things. So what did we need people to be able to see? So thinking about what the camera was looking at in the room, what things needed to be presented on the screen, what things did we want people to be able to have and physically in some way interact with, what did we need people to be able to hear, and who did we need to be able to hear within the classroom, you know, back and forth and vice versa. We spent a lot of time thinking about how we were going to interact with people. So there were some activities that we did in the process of our workshop where we had the people in person organize slips of paper, but we didn't want those who were distanced to not be able to participate in that activity as well. So we had to think about a way for them to interact with that content as well. And so for that, we really moved to different online platforms like a Jamboard and a Google Doc where they could interact with things as well. And thinking about that, we certainly had to think about what level of computer access people had. If you've dealt with any of Google Drive's documents before, knowing the importance of sharing documents correctly is super important, and I certainly made that mistakes a few times. It also is important to think about the class size, and so having enough resources in class available and how we would be able to engage with people within the classroom while still not being too distracted with what was happening online at the same time. So there were quite a few things to consider in the process of just getting ready for this. So I think there are several resources on the CTL workshop on things to help you think about using a high flex style of teaching, a bit of a checklist to go through before you kind of dive in. But we want to be able to show you the room if you hadn't been there. And so this is in the Kennedy building. So this is the high flex room. As you can see, it's not a huge room, so it does have seating capacity for 15 participants. There are several pieces of technology that are included in this room that are super useful. So it does have a podium that controls most of the technology in the room. And some of the key features that you need to be aware of is that there are 2 golf ball microphones that exist in the room. And I think I can point them out. Here's one here in the back of the room, and the other one is up in the front near the podium. So when we talked about thinking about who needs to be heard and when do they need to be heard, knowing that in this room you have to be mindful to speak a bit directionally towards that microphone so that the people who are online can be able to hear you. But these microphones are also really good at picking up sound. So being mindful as well that if you're having discussion activities within the classroom, that the people online can hear conversations in the classroom very well. And so if you as the instructor are trying to talk over a classroom discussion, that it's going to be very hard to hear you. So being mindful of also managing the classroom in terms of when to make sure the class is quiet before you start speaking, or if you should mute the classroom so that students who are virtual can think clearly without distraction.
Oh yeah, that's good.
There is a camera in the back of the room. So this is at the very back of the room, right above a television. And so that camera does allow two viewpoints. So one is directly at the podium. So it has a more zoomed in focus at the podium. So if you stand at the podium to discuss, or you have a wide view, which allows you to kind of see the full room. So if you're moving around the classroom, or if you want those who are virtual to see what's happening around the room, then you can change that focus. And again, those are both controlled from the podium. There are also additional monitors, so you can see as the instructor both the participants you have online, as well as any presentations or PowerPoints on multiple screens at one time. So you do have a good ability to be able to see who you want to talk to, but also to be able to see what they're seeing at the same time.
Thank you so much, Courtney and Lane. That was a fabulous presentation. I will now invite our next presenters, Dr. Felicia Harris and Suzanne Collins, to share their presentation.
Is it not letting me unmute?
You are unmuted, Felicia. We can
Okay.
hear you. Yes.
So now I just need to share the PowerPoint.
Yep. Just hit share screen and.
Okay. And where do I need to go?
Bottom of your screen on Zoom, green button. Yep. There you go. We
There
can
we
see
go.
it. And then if you go full screen, we should be able to. Yep.
There we go.
That's it.
Good morning, and glad to be here. Our presentation is on coming back to the classroom with new tools, and part of the thoughts around this topic had a lot to do with just the transition that we talked about in our group, the transition of really coming back to the classroom in this adjusted format. If we think back the last actually 3 years of transitions that students have had, and the influx then of using an online environment to continue to still have student engagement. And so that was really the basis of coming together to look at what then can we do to use some new tools in a creative way in this almost new environment and space. And I think we're all at the end of the semester, so I've had a semester to kind of think about this, and was talking with some colleagues, and really and truly thinking about students in this space and learning in this, I won't say disjointed space, but students have communicated just that transition from moving from face-to-face to online, then to online and some in person, and then back in person has been a bit of a struggle in some cases. And so being able to use some great tools in that online space, I think has helped students as well. So let me get, and my group was myself, Suzanne Collins, and Cynthia Hancock. And let me get to my screen. A couple of things in us thinking about this online space was just the perspective sometimes with the online space, that it's only there to record, technology, or to reduce the capacity and involvement in terms of a face-to-face. But we know, of course, the internet and the online space can help to increase student social capacity and the way that they interact with material. It is also, as I have learned over this last couple of years and this semester in particular, it's really a wonderful way to create some connections just in a different space where students can positively participate more in, this not only global economy, but in a more online global space, which they'll be interacting with, while they're still here on campus, and then once they move beyond. We also talked about, encouraging and how to create this just great, just right learning environment with students. And again, as simply put, as you can see on the screen, it's really what's going to be the best environment, for our students. where they feel connected and developing that sense of connection in a almost kind of disconnected space where we're not in a space where you can, have the physicality there. Also having students being able to have that sense of trust that's easier to develop, of course, in a face-to-face, but a trusting environment, where students are held accountable for their actions, not just by us as instructors, but for themselves as well as their classmates. The interaction also in terms of utilizing the technology, having cameras on, showing their face, being able to see each other is another way to have this sense of connection. I think as I look back over this semester, students in some of my classes really struggle with managing just even cutting on their cameras, because one student said, well, I'm doing this and that and the other, and explaining to them, this is still your learning environment space, even though you may be sitting in front of us, of course, in pajamas, but having students commit to that, make sure that's, of course, expectation at the beginning, so there's no confusion. One of the other things that I enjoyed doing this semester was social checks, particularly at the beginning of the semester when we were still doing online before we onto full-time space, face-to-face. And instead of having space, figuring out a time during that transition where students are coming on to have a conversation, or I think I put in here chit chat, talking about their lives, what's going on, coming off the holiday, did they go anywhere, specifically different that they hadn't planned to, but being able to, again, create that trusting space where they could do that. Some examples of preloading slides that show current events. We did a lot of current events talking, cartoons, trivia, just simple things that's, again, gonna allow for some engagement, particularly at the very beginning of class. And then a couple of other, because I know my time will be coming short. Another way that I also did that was assigning students to even begin to start that space, so that there was some responsibilities for them, a way for them to build community with one another, as well as to feel invested in the course themselves. It also allowed them a way to get to know each other. So you're just not seeing, someone in a frame, you're actually, having dialogue beyond just putting them in, the individual breakout rooms that you can also utilize during the class itself. Group work was one of the last things that I did, and I didn't know how quite that would work, or when we were talking about, but assigning group work and really allowing students to work in that space, especially in breakout rooms, ended up being very, 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 very well received. Students enjoyed it, and that allowed me to delegate some of the responsibility back to students, so they're in, these smaller subsets. And I will stop there, and thank you so much, Jewel.
Thank you so much, Felicia.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's a great presentation, and I will invite our next presenters, Deborah and Pilar, to share their presentation.
All right, good morning. So I am Pilar Zuber. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Public Health Sciences, and I have worked with CTL and active learning for many, many, many years now.
My name is Deborah Beat, and I am a lecturer in Public Health Sciences as well. And yeah, I don't have as many years as Pilar, but I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging tough. So we are
She's
excited.
getting there. I keep a hold on her. So we're going to talk today about using Canvas as a learning tool. And I honestly feel a little bit like we are doing an extension of Felicia's presentation because there is a lot of overlap in what she was talking about. So the first thing is just to consider some of these assumptions, and really one primary assumption, which is that Canvas is not a passive resource. It is a learning management system, and we tend to focus on sort of management as the primary purpose of Canvas. It's a place where we put materials. It's a repository. Students submit their assignments there, so we don't have to worry about paper anymore. And we don't think of it as something we really interact with and can use as one of the learning tools in our courses. And so we want to make sure we sort of shift that assumption from Canvas being a passive resource to Canvas being an active part of our courses. And it's a very effective tool for removing some of those barriers to learning, particularly, Canvas is Canvas. We buy the product, but UNC Charlotte has built up its own Canvas and so many capabilities that really increase that access for students.
So as we think about, I think that for most of us, when we think about sort of the asynchronous environment, it's really easy to think of Canvas as a learning tool, right? Because it's really all you have around here. But I think that when we're looking at some of our other modes, it is a lot harder to think about. We often then automatically use it as a repository, but as someone who has now used it both face-to-face, hybrid, and synchronously, I have realized that using it the way that I use it in an asynchronous environment is actually helpful to every student that I teach. So it doesn't matter if these students are seeing me every week, they still benefit from the way that I've structured an asynchronous environment. All right.
So we've just highlighted here on this screen some of the tools in Canvas. As I said, there are, Jules, I'm sure knows the number, but it seems like hundreds of tools. I mean, if you really sort of went in and added them all up, as with any presentation I've ever done, these are things that Deborah and I have to a certain extent used. We don't use all of them. And we would never advocate for just saying you have to do all of these things in your class. But even something as simple as using the front page tool, there are many different ways to set up your course. I have been in courses where they just use modules and you log in and all of a sudden you just have this long list, and it can be overwhelming. And so we have been using for many years the front page. And so it allows us to set the tone. You can put graphics, you can put links, you can put buttons, information. And so that is what invites, that's the first thing people see when they log into your Canvas course. And so that's what they see. We also use it because we can take advantage of things like links, use it as a navigation tool. Oh, you want to go here, click on this button. You want to find this, click on this button. And then even something as simple as using the availability of setting up your most recent announcements at the top of the page. So I have two, and you can set the number. I have two, and so whatever I've just sent out is sitting at the top of the page for students. And announcements themselves are an active way of using Canvas because students get an email with the information, but it sits in Canvas and you can put links. We link to other announcements, so that it's always there. And then modules you can use for organization. You can have your syllabus embedded within a module. We have also used peer review so that students are interacting with each other. And this, this could be for an online course where they don't necessarily see each other, or even in conjunction with a face-to-face course. In terms of integrations, I have fallen in love with Kaltura. I feel like every month I'm learning some new thing that I can do with Kaltura, as well as now my students can do. So it changes how I might do an assignment, how I might expect them to submit something. And both in it's easier, it facilitates things, but also it increases access. They can all access Kaltura. It's provided to them. They're not worried about video systems. They're not worried about anything like, do I have the appropriate software, because it's there. And then some of the others that you may have already used, practice quizzes, where you can put feedback. So if they put the incorrect answer, a box can pop up to, to give them some feedback on that. And then, most of us have probably used discussion boards, and some of us have used the collaborations, which is where you can set up a Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet or Google Slides within Canvas. So you can assign students to it and it's all housed there in Canvas.
So we wanted to just give you an example from 2 of our courses about how we are using the front page as a learning tool. So part of this is removing a barrier to learning, right? So very often, I'm sure you all, if you've ever had to view someone else's course, you either pick up something or you think that is not the way that we should be doing this, right? So you have one of the 2 reactions, but this is 2 ways. So in the Health 2102 Foundations of Public Health, there are buttons on the page for each one of the modules. So if a student comes, they can go directly to the module with the, just by clicking on it, and they are taken directly to that in the module section. In the Intro to Health Professions course, that front page changes every week. So every week there's a box there that I can update so that when students come to the page, they are able to sort of see what is either coming up or what is going on in our week. And this was in the HSMT 2101 course is asynchronous. And I do some variation of watching everything literally every week because they have to read and watch everything. So this is just 2 examples of the way that we have used this. I have seen lots of other pages that are beautifully done by other people where they are using buttons in a variety of different ways. They are using scroll. If you are into Canva, you can even put like a scrolling message on your front page. I have seen that. I have seen things that are sort of slowly flashing, not to like trigger anyone, but like slowly flashing to make it a more inviting page for students. So there's just so much you can do, especially if you're willing to put a little bit of the work into it to do it on the front end.
So just we wanted to finish up with we started out with challenges and then we sort of realized there were really opportunities. So you may be looking at this going like, hey, that sounds really great, but I don't know how to use any of that. Well, you do have to consider the ability to use technology of both your learner, your students, as well as your own. But it's an opportunity to learn more. And here's what I'll put in my plug for CTL. CTL runs so many workshops on these. Check out their page because you can see where you can go. And I'll tell you a secret, if they don't offer a workshop, I bet if you like email Jules and say, hey, can you help me with this? Or can someone help me integrate this? They'll do it. Because they want you to use those tools and make a better learning experience for your students. Time, effort, and energy. We can't create time, but a lot of this is something you do once and then you can carry it over. So if you are able to pull aside the time and the effort and the energy to do it once, it becomes maintenance. You're not doing it all over every single time. And then considering things like class size and accessibility. I tend to teach large classes and it seems much more overwhelming in those large classes. But actually using Canvas as an active part of learning can help sort of make your class seem smaller. You can make it into like smaller chunks and use it in a way that facilitates learning and students don't feel like they're sort of in this vast, huge class anymore. Basically, that's what we have. I know I'm keeping track of time, but and I feel like the chat just went crazy, so I'm going to look in there real quick, but thank you.
Thank you so much, both Pilar and Deborah. So we are at the moment now where we are going to open the floor up for questions for any of our Lightning Talk presenters this morning. Let's give a round of applause to all of our Lightning Talk presenters this morning. Thank you. And we have a few minutes here that are for Q&A for any of our presenters this morning. So I'll say, if you have a question for any of our presenters this morning, please do drop it in the chat right now, and I will read it out. Please let us know who the question is directed to and what your question is.
I will actually answer. There was a question from Celia about Kaltura. I basically started using it during the pandemic to do instructor presentation, recorded presentations for my students. And then I started, and again, just even recently, I realized I can set it up so that students can use Kaltura to make their own recorded presentation. So like the assignment they just submitted was a PowerPoint and they had to narrate it. So Kaltura, you can do it with video, without video. But with Kaltura, it's all basically within Canvas. It's within my media. It's much easier for them to submit. You don't have to worry about file sizes. I also just set up an activity. I set it up as a practice quiz. So I had questions and I could embed a video through YouTube. So it has to be YouTube. It's the only one they use, but I could embed a YouTube link. So the question is like, watch this video and then respond to this prompt. And again, all that is within Kaltura. So you use the Kaltura, embed tool, but if you click, like those three little buttons, more just reveals all sorts of options that they can use. There's also integrations with like Office, things like that. So finding out that, students have access to Office 365, so that they can, create, like I said, a narrated PowerPoint and then submit it. And then all you have to go do is view it. You're not worried about file type. It's right there. You literally hit play and
Thanks,
you watch
Paula.
it, you grade it, you have your rubric in there, you grade it, and it's all within there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a question here for our first presenters, Susanna and Brittany. What differences are you seeing in your teaching experience as a result of your mindful approach to the whole self in teaching?
Thank you for the question, Jules. I will say the empathy that is in the classroom and everybody's encouraging everybody. It's just, it's the wave of, especially during the pandemic when we don't know what we don't know, what everybody's going through. Bringing that piece of kindness and energy in the classroom has created a lot of great cohorts this semester.
Okay, thank you. Another question here that came in for our second group, Lane and Courtney. It says, how did you come to choose to use HiFlex for your presentation? So what would you like the university to do to help you as we begin to do more HiFlex teaching?
We went to that option because we were going to be in person for this particular conference, and we ended up going to all virtual. So it became a good exercise in how that can work successfully. The university would have to invest a lot of time and money, and training is primary for this particular strategy, to be in person on site with other faculty like Jules, staff and faculty who know how to use these strategies. They would, the university would have to invest a lot more money to equip classrooms, but it's not just equipment dependent. It really is that training and demo and practice that makes it relevant. I feel like this is the culmination of the Pandora's box that has been opened, that COVID opened for us and said, no longer is it just in person or all online. It's a combination of both, and that this different strategies make them equal. One is not lesser than the other. And you may have more to add to that, Jules, as to why we chose that.
I have a second part question on this. It looks like here about the HiFlex. What technologies do you think you find to be most important when planning to teach a HiFlex course?
I would say planning how you're going to do the activities for the both in-person and distance learners. So like for whatever we used
at the next
Jamboard
right
in order to do that physical activity. So making sure that you've got some kind of plan of action of how you're going to be able to allow both parties to engage with one another. And so even people in the room could have had Jamboard and worked collaboratively, but having kind of an idea of how you're going to handle that, I think, in advance is important.
Turn right onto Henry Street.
Okay, thank you very much. So I am not seeing any more questions in the chat, and I do want us to have a brief break before our next presentation starts at 10 o'clock. And so I do want to let you all know that we're going to have a little bit of change here in the administration. I am going to be handing the Lightning Talk administration off to my colleague, Jessica Capote. There she is, waving at us right now, which means I'm about to make her host of this session. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a switch right now while you all take a coffee break or a bio break. And so we're going to make that change. Jessica will become host. She will be taking care of all of our co-hosts. I'm going to be game to go set up for our special guest speaker at 11 o'clock. All co-hosts, don't worry, Jessica knows exactly what to do to help you. And everybody else, take a break. We're going to get started exactly at 10 o'clock on the dot for our next presenters, which include Bobby, Joanna, and Jessamine. Okay, so we will be ready to go at 10. Have a break, everybody, and we'll be right back. Thank you for being with us this morning.
We're going to be talking about leveraging active learning strategies to promote inclusivity and equity. Let me just... real quickly, we're going to be identifying strategies to leverage all student voices in class activities, listing 3 strategies for building intentional teams, and then describing 3 ways of using visual methods and their benefits and challenges in relation to equity. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page as we move forward, we want to acknowledge that faculty and students are navigating a climate on our campus that may not feel equitable. So as we start talking about sort of how we can bring equity into the classroom, it's important to recognize that we're all coming in different spaces, that faculty working to address some of this, maybe using personal resources and maybe challenged to do so in their institutional climate, and then students may be navigating a lack of support or institutional betrayal from UNC Charlotte and may feel hesitant or challenged to quote unquote actively engage in some of the ways that we're promoting here. So I think I went over too fast. Joanna, do you want to run through these introductions as I hand it over to you?
Sure. So Bobby is going to start and review what some of, let me see, those 3 objectives. He will identify techniques, to leverage all the student voices in the classroom. And I'm going to talk about a few strategies for building intentional teams that might promote more inclusivity. And then Jessamine will follow up with 3 methods of using visuals in active learning approaches that might benefit equity and inclusion in the classroom. So we'll let Bobby start.
Thanks so much, folks. So one of the things that's interested me in terms of teaching and learning is how to engage the wonderful diversity we have in our classrooms, all of the voices, and in so doing, how it results in the creation of community. So the next slide, Jess, if you would, please. I follow a community of inquiry model, which looks at these 3 types of presences in a classroom. So the teaching presence, which comes from both the instructor and the students, the cognitive presence, which is the extent to which we engage with content, how we create or orchestrate learning for students, and finally that social piece where we interact with one another. Okay, so there are 3 types of strategies for engagement. The first are total class participation techniques, collaborative activities, and then leveraging students as experts. Next slide. One of the things I do is before the course even begins, I ask students to complete a learning profile. You see an example of that, my French 1201 class on the left-hand side, which already begins to engage students and gives them an opportunity to let me know more about them other than, this is my first time taking French, or here are my interests. I use online videos to introduce myself, and very often very informal sorts of videos, so that they can see me not as this polished professional, but rather as a human being, albeit a polished professional, I hope, at the same time. And then I also use Flipgrid quite a bit to get students to lend their voices to the classroom. So if they feel pressured during the face-to-face experience, perhaps outside of class, they have the opportunity on their own time to create a video to introduce themselves and to feel a little bit more comfortable in engaging in the community. Next slide, Jess. Another great tool that I highly recommend is Google's free Jamboard. Someone talked earlier about the extent to which students are ready to participate in class. So I gauge their readiness through activities like this, where all students have access to create a Post-it note, and they can either put their name or be anonymous with a nom de plume and indicate, in this case, to what extent they have a lot of energy and how they're feeling on a particular day. Next slide, please. From day one, I create and use exit tickets, again, through tools like Jamboard, where everybody has the opportunity to share something they liked about the class and something they understood well, or the converse, something that was still muddy for them. So again, this equals or levels the playing field so that everybody in the class has the opportunity to lend their voice to this aspect of the lesson. Next slide, please. Another tool I highly recommend is Desmos. Originally created for mathematics with federal dollars, but now we've discovered as language educators that there are great benefits for us to engage all learners and to engage in formative assessment. So during class, I can see right away via the instructor dashboard where students are in terms of their understanding a particular concept or a skill. In this case, being able to put in order the sentences that form a short little interaction or dialogue between two speakers. Next slide, please, Jess. Desmos also allows me to get student feedback, again, as an exit ticket or at any point during the class or outside of the class. Next slide, Jess. And then throughout the semester, students have the opportunity to share a lot about themselves by creating a book all about me. It's an opportunity for them to see from the get-go, through my example, what they're going to be able to do at the end of this course. And here's a fantastic example from a previous student who shared a lot about themselves in this book, and was a really fun thing for them to do, and an opportunity for them to, again, feel like they can see themselves as a part of our classroom community. Next slide, Jess. Okay, so what is the impact of including all voices in a classroom? Well, we can leverage students' lives as the fodder for discussions, for developing skills and knowledge. It fosters culturally responsive teaching practices. It allows students to see themselves in the work, to feel connected, and it fosters a sense of responsibility and onus on the student role in their learning. Thank you. Okay, so something to think about: what strategies do you use to include all voices? Thanks, Jess. I'm going to hand it over to you or Joanna.
Okay, so I find building teams. So I work in the active learning classroom in the new science building this year, and I have students work in teams. And the first thing I recognize is that I need to get student buy-in, and it helps if I give them very specific roles, like your job is to kind of manage. But what worked for me this semester was making it very clear that we're working in teams and not in groups. And I define a group is a group of individuals who are each doing a small piece of the project, and then they come together and put it all together to make their final submission. Whereas I'm having my students work in teams, and they're working on the same goal, but providing different perspectives to come to a consensus. And so I make it very clear to them that they're working on a team project, not a group project, so that they can begin working as teams. And so building intentional teams becomes important when we want to be more inclusive. And so you can flip the slide. Right. So what some things you need to think about is that women and minorities, if they're outnumbered, they can be silenced or made to feel that they shouldn't contribute, especially when we're working to build consensus. Conflict avoidance becomes an issue. Isolating women and minorities on a team could be counterproductive. So for learning purposes, it helps if the teams are of mixed ability. You have your students, your A student leaders, and then you have your quiet students who maybe need to learn more. And so keeping the teams of mixed ability is helpful as well. And so next slide. So some of the strategies that I found for building these intentional teams are to ask, before you build the team, ask students to respond to a questionnaire, and then sort the students according to their preferences. There's an actual online tool that Penn State put out that's actually really useful. It's called CatMe, and you can use it to actually to build these intentional groups based upon feedback that these forums request from the students. And you can then group your students by interest in their topics. So next slide. And so this talks about what the CatMe tool is, and I can put the link to it in the chat if you want.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I'm sorry to say that we are required to move on to the next group to keep with our schedule. Certainly these resources are going to be made available, and we hope to see them in the chat, or we can share them during our Q&A at the end. So next on our list is Matt Metzger and his group. So Matt, if you want to share, thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm Matt Metzger. I think Monica's going to go first here, but our topic is improving student engagement, effective time management, and increasing attendance.
So basically, I'm going to talk about what student engagement is. It is basically, is best understood as a relationship between the student and their learning environment. And, for the students to learn and absorb and sustain an information and the knowledge that we are providing. Next slide, please. So there are three main types of student engagement, which is behavioral, cognitive, and emotional. Behavioral is, when students participate in the learning process, they show up on time, etc. Cognitive is when students try to learn as much as they can, and not only, just paying to the attention to the class, but going beyond it. And emotional is when students have positive outlook on their educational experience. Next slide, please. So there are many benefits of student engagement. The literature shows that, there is more academic achievement, satisfaction, better social skills, better graduation skills, high standardized test scores. These are the benefits of student engagement. Next slide, please. So the current situation or the trend from 2018 Gallup poll shows that nearly half of the students are engaged, while a significant one of them are not engaged, and also some of them are actively disengaged. And the poll also found that students become less engaged as they advance through the education system. Next slide, please. So some of the strategies that we have found from our literature and our work is, meeting one-on-one with each student. Of course, that might not be possible if you have large classes, creating short videos, asking them to engage with you, what they're feeling, what they're learning, things like that. Next question, please. Next slide, please. And, having regular meeting, assigning group work, there is a lot of criticism for group work, but it is also essential, when people can, learn from each other, creating pen pals or, study groups or class buddies. Next slide, please. So, some of the tools that are available, I think most of them you guys might have used: Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, Flipgard, ClassKick, Zello, PowerPlay. These are some of the ones that have, been found to, through video, through different, mechanisms, developing critical thinking as well. Next slide, please. So there are some additional strategies, fill the dead time, use group work for collaboration, give students a say, and get your students moving. Basically, it says that, involving more students makes it, more helpful. Next slide, please. Read the room when we say that, see what your each session of the same course can be very different, allow for some think time in between your lectures, shake up things, give some videos, give some on the spot analysis, or depending on your subject matter, think, things that could be changed. Next slide, please. This is again, we can use mixed media, be a little bit more personable, encourage friendly competition. And, in my classes, I usually give a very, like a bonus assignment, just introduce yourself. So that gets the students rolling and come out of that, hitch of public speaking or, discussing in public. So these things have been found helpful for student engagement. Next slide, please. So this was my part. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think now my group members will take over.
Okay, thanks, Monica. This next section, increasing attendance in class, is mine. So the big question I had when we started back in fall 2021 in person was, I, like I'm sure many others, recorded lectures and had a whole bunch of other online materials we developed during the year and a half on Zoom. And so if you leave all those up there, all those lectures and other online resources, our students still going to show up in class. So the fall 2021 class, I was able to compare to fall 2019 class because everything was almost exactly the same. It was the same classroom, it was the same instructor, me, the same format, same size, same exams. I just really duplicated what I did 2 years ago pre-COVID. And the only main difference as far as the online resources was these recorded lectures that, most of the stuff I did in class, I recorded kind of an abbreviated condensed version online and put that up there. And then so the question would be, would they come? So I tracked attendance via Poll Everywhere. And so, I could easily find out that way how many people were showing up in class or not. Now, of course, some students do, try to hit Poll Everywhere even though they're not in class. But visually, I could see it was pretty close. That wasn't really happening to a large extent. So if you look at 2019 through 2021, it was very close. And in fact, fall 2021 was actually a little more consistent as far as there weren't the highs and the lows that took place there. So that seemed pretty positive. And, I also polled my students at the end of that semester and just asked, are you even watching these videos? Maybe I was worried about this and they're not, a main driver. So 2/3 had said yes, 1/3 about no there. So the attendance, again, and kind of summing up, seems to have been the same as before, maybe a little more consistent. Recorded lectures didn't seem to be a big deal. Now, that was all fall 2021. Spring 2022 has been a much, much different story. There seems to have been some kind of shift in student attitudes, student preferences, engagement, like Monica was talking about earlier in some of the previous presentations. That's really changed attendance patterns much more in the spring 2022 semester. But that's a topic for a different time. And I will now pass it off to Mary Ellen.
Good morning, everybody. I know I'm limited on time, so I'll try to go through this quickly, but I have my section on time management, and I have 3 specific areas. One is I discuss a study that I looked at comparing time management with students with online classes versus face-to-face. And I think that that was spurred, my interest in that was spurred based on the fact that we went to online classes during COVID, and to see how students were able to manage and navigate their situations online, which was a new experience for most of them, as opposed to being face-to-face. So that's one section of my presentation. The next is I did a personal survey of my students, and just to see what they were experiencing with their online experience versus face-to-face. And then the third section of the presentation is just tips and strategies to help students with their time management, and even us as instructors, because like so many of our previous presentations stated that, you know, we're experiencing a lot of those same effects of COVID, and just trying to navigate our own way of trying to reach the students. So Matt, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this study, and I realized that this study was from 2015, so I want to do more research that it's a little bit more current. And that was one of the reasons why I did my own survey last semester in the fall of 2021, just to see how maybe these results compared with my results. This just describes the students that were surveyed at the University of Houston. And Matt, go ahead. Okay, there were three main questions involved in the study, and I have a lot more content. I simplified it for this short presentation, but if you want more information, I can provide it later. But one of the questions was, are there identifiable characteristics of students who were proficient in time management? And these were some of the results. Older students were stronger. Students with high GPA had stronger time management. Surprisingly, students with low GPA still had a pretty relatively strong time management, and then their status of their, if they were employed or not. Matt, next slide. And another feature of that study was online design features. So how much, and this goes back to using Canvas from the previous presentation. So how much does our use of the Canvas features or the LMS, how much does that influence students? So students who had a low feature or used the features of their LMS lower, they had a higher time management issue. Go ahead to the next slide. And then what were some management strategies that the students used to help with their time management? So they recorded dates of assignments. They used online recording and not just physical like calendars. They reserved specific times for study. They followed a study plan and they planned ahead. Go ahead, Matt. And this just kind of summarizes it. So there is a relationship between students' time management and just various other factors. So it's not just on the student. There are other factors. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you so much. We do appreciate your presentation, and obviously there are a number of fabulous resources. Hopefully we'll be able to connect these with everybody. We're going to move on to our next group, and thank you again for the sharing of such fabulous information. I think all of us are delighted to see a scatter plot for sure. Everyone, we all love data, right? I mean.
Okay,
yes.
So our group is looking at how pedagogy has changed from pre-COVID to all of the COVID whiplash back and forth online, in-person online, and what of this we may have learned to pull into teaching in the present day and in the future. And so my group is Paloma Fernandez Sanchez, and I'll let everybody introduce themselves, and Celia Sinclair and myself, Kat Fuentes. And I believe, Celia, you're up first.
Right. Thank you so much, Kat. And thank you, everybody. And I want to shift the metaphor a little bit from the Pandora's box to, and I was trying to think of something else that was more positive. And I came up with Genie out of the bottle, which can be negative, but I really do think that the genie that came out of the bottle in the past 2 years has, for me, been most positive. And I don't mean to be Pollyanna, so at all. My husband's Pollyanna in this, but what I've found, and this slide is just one thing that I share with my students, but what I've found with my asynchronous online courses is that I'm getting better and better writing. Why? Because they're practicing and they're reading each other. And I just go ahead and tell them, this is for my CTC Liberal Studies 2301 course. I just go ahead and tell them, these are the 3 things you're going to be doing. You're doing this, what, so what, now what? What is it that you saw on the video or read? So what, the analysis you want to bring to that, and then the now what, which is the action piece, and that we're doing that in this iterative fashion every week, to where they, by the end of the semester, they've written seriously 15,000 words. So you got to get better when you're doing that. I love that model, and they get it, and then they're reading each other and applying it. Peer reviews, all this stuff I didn't really do pre-COVID, but now that I'm asynchronous online, I depend on that. So as one student said, well, that just makes you a professional grader. And I go, shut up. But in a way, there's some truth to that, that I'm looking at a lot of words. And one of the key things that for a takeaway for you all is canned comments. I have pages and pages of canned comments. If I have to write something once, I save it, I put it in the document, and then I just copy and paste it to there. I've also learned from this group, and this is also the genie out of the bottle, that these people, you all people, from Bobby to Jessica to Heather to Jules to, Kat, everybody, that the resources are just so tremendous that I didn't tap as much pre-COVID, although I've always done active learning, but yeah, I've always done active learning stuff, but this is just way different. And I'll stop because I can move on to the next slide, but thank you all for that, for all you've done.
Hi, this is Paloma Fernandez Sanchez. So a little bit continuing with what Celia is saying, the class that I'm using, or that I use for this presentation, is an oral communication class, and the same that Celia shared about writing, the quality of the oral assignments, it has gone through the roof. It's much better. They have the time to reflect. They have the time to do all these peer reviews. We have all these wonderful resources. Yay to the use of Canvas as a tool. And it also helped, at least in my class, a lot with engagement, which has been really hard this semester. But the fact that they have everything or a lot of it on Canvas, and they can, go back to it, check there. If they miss one day because of many circumstances, they can, get caught up. So again, in my case, in my opinion, yeah, it has been mostly positive. The students, I believe, are getting more out of the class in terms of reflecting on what they are doing, being aware of what they are doing, the purpose of what they are doing. It also helped me, as I mentioned, with the differentiated learning. Maybe the classes that I teach, they are for Spanish speakers, native speakers. These students don't have a Spanish from a textbook. All of them have different Spanish, they have different levels. So it is very important for me to differentiate, and we are all going to achieve the student learning outcomes, but that's going to look differently for each of them. And using Canvas and using the pre-recorded lessons has helped me a lot in achieving this. And as has been mentioned, accessibility is also, I believe, all these online tools help us with accessibility. And I'm gonna let Kat talk a little bit.
Okay, and I'll try to keep it brief so that we do have time for question and answers. And so many other people have already said what I thought I was doing uniquely. But when we first, so I have taught on fully online asynchronous classes for a while now. And when I was first asked to do this, I did not like the idea of it at all. And so I thought, over the years, I've actually gotten pretty good at it and students have been happy with it. But with COVID, when we were forced to go online, my big intro class, Introduction to Anthropology 101, has 150 people. And I thought, there is no way. But quickly, with the help of the Center for Teaching and Learning and talking to other people, I found ways that we could have some interaction. And I polled my students, and they overwhelmingly needed asynchronous, but wanted synchronous or face-to-face. But because of all the, a lot of students going back home and caretaking and other stuff, needed asynchronous. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't just a data dump, because I have a hard enough time getting them to listen or engage face-to-face. So I knew if I just dumped a bunch of information and said, okay, go to this, that it wouldn't happen. So I used the pre-recorded lectures with videos. I tried to keep those shorter and break them down more. Frequent group discussion assignments so I could make sure they were actually listening to the pre-recorded lectures and doing their readings. And where I would ask questions, not only directly about the material factually, but trying to get them to pull it into everyday life and really reflect on it and comment to one another. And I did Zoom office hours so they could actually see me and talk to me. And I had students do recorded presentations since they couldn't do in-class presentations. There were pros and cons to all of these things. But now that my big class is back face-to-face, there are a lot of these things I've kept. So someone was talking about, the pre-recorded lectures. I was very afraid to do this, that no one would show up or, that engagement would be low. But what I have found is there's a certain group of students who want to be face-to-face. And by giving the pre-recorded lectures, students can get the bulk of the blah, 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 blah lecture kind of stuff out of the way, so that when we're in the classroom, we can be more actively learning and applying what they've learned and doing group work. I also still use Zoom for office hours. They have the option of face-to-face or Zoom, either way. And students have really liked this, especially since we have a large body of non-traditional students who may be not on campus or at work. They can actually meet me now. They can, at their 10-minute break, check in. So in the recorded presentations, I'm actually using in my senior seminar, which is only 5 students. But one thing I've learned to love about the Kaltura presentations that they record, they can actually see themselves. And I think this has been hugely beneficial. In the past, they would stand up at the podium. I would use a rubric and assess them, and but they couldn't see sort of mistakes they were making or other things. With the recorded presentations that they do, they can see themselves and they can do it over and over. And I think this really leads to huge improvement in their presentations, because they have as many tries as they would like. So I anticipate continuing to use these things into the future, because even though we're now back in the classroom, we're definitely not back to normal. As many people have been pointing out, engagement's incredibly difficult, but I plan on continuing to use these things in the future. So, and I will stop at that point.
Thank you so much. All of these are absolutely fantastic. And we're going to enter our Q&A session at this time. And we've got some questions that I want to cover. Sorry, my chat just disappeared with that. So now I got to find it again. All right, so for Bobby's group first, it's great to see total class participation helps increase social presence. In terms of community of inquiry, could you share some of the students' responses or feedback?
Yeah, so since you mentioned my name, Jessica, I'll take that. Absolutely. Students tell me throughout the semester and at the end that one of the things that contributes to their success is the opportunity to try out some new knowledge. In our case, language, right? With a classmate. So it is non-threatening. It's an opportunity for them to practice it, to own that material before they put themselves out there in a more public sphere, i.e. the entire community. So I hope that addresses the question.
Thank you so much. And for Matt's group, did you find any correlation or effect on student grades and or satisfaction with video lectures?
I did not run that analysis. That's a good question, but I'd have to double check.
Okay. And Celia's group, it's been reported that the quality of reflective work in asynchronous setup increased. Do you find any particular group of students that you see who benefited from the setup?
Oh gosh, anybody who writes well at home, anyone who writes in the middle of the night, anyone who chooses their timing. Over and over again, that's just what I'm hearing, is that having the choice is so important. And frankly, guys, I will never go back.
Yeah, well, this is not about writing, but about speaking also when the topic goes beyond what did you do last night or what did you do over the summer. In the class that I teach, we are talking about immigration. We are talking about being bilingual. What does it mean? How did you grow up and how does shape your identity? Well, these things, when I ask a student on the spot, just tell me how growing up as a bilingual shape up your identity. Well, okay, let me think about it. And then I'm asking them to build, right? Not just give me a sentence, but, give me your opinion, contrast your opinion, share. And so all of these needs to be thought of, needs to be constructed a little bit, and then I can share my opinion. But even I don't think I can share a well-constructed answer on any of those topics just on the spot. So I think anybody, and again, as Celia mentioned, in the class, you have 20 minutes. Just give me an answer in 20 minutes. At home, there are many things going on at home too, but you get more time and you choose when and how to think about and how to prepare.
Wonderful. So for group one again, what questions do you typically include on the learning profiles? So that'd be Bobby's group.
Yeah, so my questions look at prior experience with the content of the course. In my case, it was French, but I also teach advanced foreign language methods. So it could be, a little bit broader than that. But beyond that, questions like, what are your strengths as a learner? What do you want me to know about you as a learner? What concerns do you have about participating and being part of a community in this course, et cetera? And then one of the questions, too, that's very important for language learning is, what is your goal for learning to speak a language? Okay, so I build a learning profile of the student through those questions, and it really gives me a good idea of where they are currently, where they're headed, and then it shapes my interactions with them throughout the course.
Thank you. And one last question for group three. Catherine's group, how much information do you give in the recorded lectures? Or another way to put it would be, is it a full lecture or is it more of a preview to the class?
Mine shifted. So at first it was sort of a short preview to what they were going to do. And I like having the visual of, hey, everybody, so today in this block, you are expected to do this, and make sure to remember blah, blah, blah. But now that I'm actually back in the class, I actually offer the full lecture. So again, that if a student misses class or whatever, they can have the full information. And for students who attend class, they can go back and hear it again and again. And it leads, so I've sort of flipped it. The full lecture is the video. Then I summarize and open that up for questions and discussions and active learning about that material during the actual class time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for answering those questions and for such great information and presentations.